Why every school in America is locking down in the sleepy town of Willowdale. A series of inexplicable events began to unfold at the local high school, events that would soon ripple across the nation. The story begins on a seemingly normal Monday morning as students of Willowdale High School streamed through the gates, their chatter filling the crisp fall air. However, an undercurrent of tension was palpable, originating from a disturbing incident the previous week when a group of students claimed to have seen ghostly figures in the school's old gymnasium. Emily Sanders, a junior and editor of the school newspaper, was particularly intrigued by these claims. Driven by curiosity and her investigative nature, she decided to delve deeper into the mystery. Accompanied by her best friend, Lucas, they sneaked into the gym late one evening. What they found was beyond anything they had expected. As they flicked on their flashlights, the beam caught a series of ancient symbols scrawled across the floor. Before they could investigate further, a chilling scream echoed through the building, sending them fleeing in terror. The next day, Emily shared her experience with Mr. Hawkins, the school librarian who was known for his knowledge of local history and folklore. Intrigued, Mr. Hawkins revealed that the school was built on the grounds of what was once a boarding school in the 1800s, known for its strict and cruel headmaster who mysteriously disappeared after a series of fatal accidents befell the students. Convinced that these past events were connected to the current hauntings, Emily and Lucas began to research the old boarding school. Their investigation led them to an old diary in the town archive, belonging to Sarah Whitmore, a student from the boarding school era. The diary entries were disturbing, filled with tales of harsh punishments and eerie occurrences, many of which centered around the gymnasium, the same place Emily and Lucas had encountered the ghostly figures. Meanwhile, across the country, similar incidents began to surface in other schools, each built on sites with dark histories. Media outlets picked up on the story, and soon it became clear that a pattern was emerging. As panic spread, schools nationwide started to lock down, with Willowdale High at the epicenter of the crisis. In an effort to find answers, Emily and Lucas contacted a noted paranormal expert, Dr. Elena Martinez, who agreed to visit Willowdale. With her equipment and expertise, Dr. Martinez conducted a night-long vigil in the gymnasium. The session was intense, with numerous manifestations and poltergeist activities. Just as Dr. Martinez began to decipher the ancient symbols, suggesting they were a form of curse meant to protect a secret buried beneath the school, the equipment began to malfunction, and a shadowy figure appeared, warning them to leave. Ignoring the warning, Emily and Lucas decided to dig deeper, literally. They started excavating beneath the gym floor. As they dug, they uncovered an old, locked chest. Just as they were about to open it, a series of loud bangs shook the school, and the ground beneath them began to crack. Fearing for their safety, they had no choice but to evacuate. As they left, the shadowy figure appeared again, its face briefly illuminated by the moonlight. Emily gasped in recognition. It bore a striking resemblance to the headmaster from Sarah Whitmore's diary. The figure pointed towards the chest, mouthing a single word, "Beware." With the school now deemed unsafe, the authorities sealed it off. The chest remained unopened, its secrets buried once more. News of the closure spread, fueling more fear and speculation across the country. Determined to uncover the truth, Emily vowed to continue her investigation. But as she dug through more historical archives, she found a warning scribbled in the margin of an old map of Willowdale: the past isn't buried. It's sleeping. And we are its dream. The story ends as Emily, her expression one of grim determination, steps into the public library to meet with a historian who claims to have new information about the headmaster and the curse. As the door shuts behind her, the screen fades to black, leaving the audience hanging on the edge of their seats, wondering what secrets the historian holds. Why every school in America is locking down continued. In the dimly lit corner of the public library, Emily waited nervously to meet with the historian who claimed to have crucial information about the cursed headmaster. Her fingers tapped impatiently on the wooden table, echoing slightly in the quiet room filled with the musty smell of old books. The clock ticked ominously, each second stretching longer than the last. Finally, a frail old man approached, his steps slow but deliberate. He introduced himself as Mr. Albert Crowley, a retired history professor who had spent years researching the dark corners of Willowdale's past. His eyes, though clouded with age, sparkled with an intensity that spoke of secrets too heavy for one soul to bear. "Thank you for meeting me, Miss Sanders," he began, his voice a whisper of leaves. "What you've stumbled upon is not just local folklore, it's a catastrophe waiting to awaken." The headmaster, Jonathan Whitley, was not just a disciplinarian, he was a practitioner of the dark arts, obsessed with immortality. Emily leaned in, her recorder capturing every word. "Do you mean he was responsible for the deaths at the old boarding school?" Mr. Crowley nodded solemnly. "Yes, and much more. He believed that the souls of those he sacrificed could be bound to protect him beyond death. The symbols you found are part of an ancient ritual that bound these souls to the school grounds, creating a nexus of spiritual energy." As he spoke, Emily felt a chill run down her spine, the air around them seeming to grow colder. Mr. Crowley pulled out an old, tattered map of the town. It showed various landmarks, but several spots were marked with red crosses. "These," he pointed, "are sites where similar occurrences have been documented over the past century. All these buildings have one thing in common: they were built over locations that Whitley used for his rituals." The implications were terrifying, and Emily struggled to keep her composure. "So, what does this mean for us now? How do we stop it?" "The chest you found," Mr. Crowley said, "it likely contains Whitley's grimoire, a book of his spells and perhaps instructions on how to undo the curse. But be warned, retrieving it will not be easy. The spirits will guard it fiercely." Determined to see this through, Emily asked for his help. Together, they planned to re-enter the school, recover the grimoire, and find a way to break the curse once and for all. Their preparation took days, gathering materials and information, while across the country, the phenomena at schools worsened, each incident more violent than the last. Finally, equipped with protective charms and salt circles, old but potent defenses against spirits, Emily and Mr. Crowley, along with a reluctant Lucas, entered the sealed-off school under the cover of night. The building moaned under the weight of its own silence, the air thick with the scent of decay. Their flashlights cut through the darkness as they made their way to the gymnasium. The ground beneath the gym floor was now exposed, the chest sitting at its center, ominously untouched since their last visit. As they approached, the temperature dropped, their breath visible in the icy air. Suddenly, shadows flickered at the edges of their vision, and a low, menacing growl echoed through the room. The protective circles flared up as ghostly figures assaulted their barriers, their faces twisted in agony and rage. Emily, heart pounding in her chest, reached for the chest, her fingers brushing against the cold metal. Just as she flipped the latch, a powerful force knocked her back, sending her sprawling to the ground. The air was filled with the screams of the damned, overwhelming their senses. Lucas and Mr. Crowley dragged Emily to her feet, retreating as the spirits swarmed around them. They barely escaped, the sounds of the tormented dead ringing in their ears as they fled the building. Outside, the night sky seemed darker than before, the stars obscured by a creeping mist that had begun to settle over Willowdale. Breathing heavily, Emily looked back at the school, her resolve hardened. "We can't give up now," she declared, the others nodding in agreement. "We have to find another way." As they retreated into the night, planning their next move, the ground where the chest lay began to crack further, a dark energy seeping from the fissures. The story paused here, with the fate of Willowdale, and possibly the entire country, hanging in the balance, the darkness growing ever stronger as the cursed headmaster's legacy continued to haunt the living. Why every school in America is locking down escalation in the days that followed their harrowing escape from the school, Emily, Lucas, and Mr. Crowley regrouped to formulate a new plan. The darkness that had begun to seep from the school's foundations seemed to spread, as if feeding on the fear and chaos it spawned. Reports of disturbances, not just in schools but throughout Willowdale, began to flood the local police station. Shadows that moved of their own accord, whispers in empty rooms, and electronics malfunctioning were just the beginning. Despite the escalating supernatural activity, Emily was more determined than ever to find a solution. She spent hours with Mr. Crowley, poring over ancient texts and occult references, looking for anything that might help them understand how to break Whitley's curse. Lucas, although skeptical and frightened, supported her, driven by loyalty and the unnerving experiences he'd faced. One evening, as they delved into a particularly old leather-bound book, Emily came across a reference to a ritual that seemed promising. It spoke of a reversal of binding, a ritual that could potentially undo spells binding spirits to a physical location. However, the ritual required an object of personal significance to the spellcaster, which they realized must be the grimoire locked within the chest at the school. Armed with this new knowledge, they knew they needed more help. Emily reached out to Dr. Martinez, the paranormal expert who had first helped them in the school. She agreed to join them, intrigued and concerned by the developments. Together, they planned a more strategic approach, equipped with more sophisticated equipment, including EMF detectors, thermal cameras, and a drone to provide an aerial view of the school's interior before they entered. The night of their return to the school was cloaked in a dense fog, the air charged with electricity. The drone buzzed overhead, transmitting eerie images of the gymnasium back to their monitors. The chest was still there, seemingly untouched, but the shadows around it swirled in an unnatural, hypnotic pattern. Taking a deep breath, they entered the building, each step forward met with increasing resistance, as if the air itself was trying to push them back. The gymnasium doors groaned as they pushed them open, revealing the chaos within. The protective circles they had left behind were now smudged and partially erased, ineffective against the spirits that roamed the area. With Dr. Martinez leading, they began to set up new circles, this time using a more potent mixture of salt and ash. The air crackled with static as the shadows grew denser, the moans of the trapped spirits growing louder. Using the ritual from the book as a guide, Emily began to chant, her voice steady despite the fear that clenched her heart. The chest began to shake, the lid rattling as if something inside was trying to escape. Suddenly, a loud snap echoed through the room, the lock on the chest broke. Before they could react, the lid flew open, and a rush of wind blasted out, extinguishing their lights and plunging them into darkness. In the pitch black, they scrambled to relight their lanterns, their ears filled with the sound of whispers and cries for help that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. When the light returned, they saw the grimoire lying open on the floor, its pages flipping as if caught in a breeze, although the air was deathly still. Dr. Martinez quickly grabbed the book, her hands trembling as she scanned the pages. "There's a counterspell here," she shouted over the din, "but it requires a sacrifice." "What kind of sacrifice?" Lucas yelled back, his voice filled with panic. "Something that binds the caster to the mortal world, blood," she replied. Without hesitation, Emily pricked her finger with a silver pin, a few drops of blood falling onto the open pages. The air grew heavier, the shadows deepening, and a deafening silence descended for a moment before a blinding light erupted from the book. As their eyes adjusted, they found themselves still standing in the gymnasium, but the atmosphere had changed. The oppressive weight was gone, replaced by a tentative calm. But as they began to breathe easier, a low, sinister laugh echoed through the building, deeper and more terrifying than anything they had heard before. The ground beneath them trembled, cracks appearing in the floor, growing wider and deeper, revealing a dark abyss below. From this abyss, a new form began to emerge, larger and more formidable than the ghostly figures they had encountered before. "This isn't over yet," Dr. Martinez said, her face pale but determined. "Whatever we've done, we've only begun to uncover the depth of Whitley's curse." As they prepared to face this new threat, the story pauses, leaving them on the brink of a deeper darkness, the school's secrets still unfolding, and the true extent of the curse yet to be. Why every school in America is locking down. The abyss beckons. The apparition that emerged from the abyss was unlike anything Emily, Lucas, or Dr. Martinez had encountered before. It towered above them, its form shifting and twisting in the dim light, a grotesque mosaic of all the tormented souls that had been bound to the school grounds. Its eyes, if they could be called that, burned with a baleful glow, casting eerie shadows across the crumbling gymnasium walls. Emily stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest as the creature began to speak in a voice that was a chorus of whispers, each syllable dripping with malice. "You dare to unbind what has been bound for centuries," it hissed, the air around it shimmering with dark energy. "The master will not be pleased." Lucas grabbed Emily's arm, pulling her back towards the door, but the creature moved with astonishing speed, blocking their path. Dr. Martinez, quick-thinking as ever, threw a handful of salt towards it. The granules seemed to burn the air before they even touched the creature, which recoiled with a screech that shook the very foundation of the school. "Run!" Dr. Martinez shouted, and this time, they didn't hesitate. They bolted towards the nearest exit, the sound of the creature's fury echoing behind them. Once outside, they didn't stop, running until they reached the safety of Lucas's car, parked a few blocks away. Panting and shaking, they took a moment to regroup. "What was that thing?" Lucas gasped, his face pale under the streetlights. "It's a manifestation of the curse itself," Dr. Martinez explained, her voice tense. "It's not just protecting the grimoire, it's protecting the curse's very essence. Whitley's spirit is likely intertwined with it, drawing power from the souls he's trapped." Emily, still clutching the grimoire, opened it to a marked page. "There's something here about a guardian of the curse, a protector summoned to prevent the curse from being broken. It says the guardian can only be banished by completing the reversal of binding in the presence of the one who cast the original spell." "But Whitley is long gone," Lucas pointed out, his skepticism returning in the face of overwhelming supernatural evidence. "Not necessarily his body," Dr. Martinez mused. "His spirit, or even something as simple as a personal relic, could suffice. We need to find his grave or any remnants of his existence." The trio spent the next few days researching, diving deeper into the town's archives and seeking out the oldest residents for any stories passed down through generations. Their search led them to an old, forgotten cemetery on the outskirts of Willowdale, where the town's founders and earliest settlers were buried. Armed with shovels and flashlights, they arrived at the cemetery as dusk fell, casting long shadows between the weathered tombstones. The air was thick with the scent of moss and decay, the silence broken only by the rustling of leaves in the wind. Emily's flashlight beam landed on a tombstone, partially obscured by ivy, with the name Jonathan Whitley carved into the weathered stone. They approached cautiously, aware of the potential dangers that awaited them. Lucas began to dig, his shovel biting into the soft earth. The job was grim, and the deeper they dug, the heavier the air felt, as if they were slicing through the very fabric of the curse itself. Finally, his shovel clanked against something solid. Wiping the sweat from his brow, he cleared away the remaining dirt, revealing an old, rusted coffin. They pried open the coffin to reveal not a body, but rather an assortment of personal items, a pocket watch, a ring, and a small, leather-bound book. Emily, recognizing the importance of these items, carefully collected them, wrapping them in a cloth. Just as they prepared to leave, the air around them chilled, and a dense fog rolled in, obscuring their vision. The sounds of whispers filled the air, growing louder, more insistent. The creature from the school was back, its form more defined, more terrifying. "This is his domain," Dr. Martinez said, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her. "We need to finish this now. Start the ritual, Emily." In the heart of the cemetery, surrounded by the dead and the creature looming over them, Emily opened the grimoire to the ritual page. She placed Whitley's personal items in front of her, her blood from the previous encounter still staining the pages. She began to chant, each word resonating through the fog, as Lucas and Dr. Martinez formed a protective circle around her. The creature roared, its form flickering as the ritual's power began to take effect. The air vibrated with energy, the ground beneath them why every school in America is locking down the veil of shadows as Emily continued the ritual. The air around them thickened, the fog swirling into vortexes that seemed to pulse with a malevolent life of their own. The ground beneath them trembled, and the whispers grew into cacophonous shouts, as if the very souls bound to the site were protesting their liberation. The guardian of the curse, its form now a towering pillar of swirling shadows and despairing faces, roared in defiance. Its presence was oppressive, a physical weight that sought to crush their resolve. But amidst the chaos, Emily's voice remained clear and unwavering, her words slicing through the tumult like a beacon of hope. Lucas, though terrified, stood his ground, holding the protective circle with Dr. Martinez. They sprinkled a mixture of salt and ash continuously, reinforcing the barrier that flickered like flame under the onslaught of the dark entity. Dr. Martinez chanted her own counterspells, her expertise in the paranormal acting as a shield against the dark energies at play. The ritual required not just the chanting but a physical connection to the past, a bridge from the present to the curse's origin. Emily took Whitley's pocket watch in one hand and his ring in the other, feeling the cold metal warm to her touch, as if reacting to the incantations. The items began to glow faintly, casting eerie lights on the pages of the grimoire, which fluttered as though caught in a storm. As the ritual neared its climax, the ground cracked open around the gravesite, revealing glimpses of a dark abyss below. From this abyss, spectral hands and faces emerged, reaching towards the night sky, yearning for release. The air was filled with the scent of earth and decay, but beneath it lay a hint of freedom, a clean scent like that of rain on dry soil, signaling the nearing end of their torment. Suddenly, the guardian let out a shriek that split the air, a sound so filled with pain and rage that it momentarily stilled the hearts of those present. It lunged forward, breaking through the protective circle with a force that sent Lucas and Dr. Martinez sprawling to the ground. Emily, though shaken, held her ground, continuing the chant with a desperate fervor. The personal items of Whitley, the watch and the ring, now radiated a blinding light that enveloped her in a protective sphere. The guardian recoiled, its form beginning to disintegrate under the intensity of the light. "Keep going!" Dr. Martinez shouted, scrambling to her feet and pulling Lucas up with her. They rushed to reinforce the circle, throwing down more salt and ash with shaking hands. The ritual's words seemed to resonate with the very air, vibrating through the ground and into the roots of the world. Emily's voice grew louder, more commanding, as she reached the final lines of the incantation. With a final, emphatic declaration, she slammed the grimoire shut, and the pocket watch and ring exploded in a shower of sparks. The explosion of light was blinding, consuming the guardian in its fiery embrace. The screams and cries of the trapped souls reached a crescendo before beginning to fade, their sounds diminishing like the end of a terrible storm. Slowly, the light receded, revealing a changed landscape. The cracks in the earth closed, the fog lifted, and for the first time in hours, the stars were visible in the clear night sky. Breathing heavily, the trio looked around in awe. The oppressive atmosphere was gone, replaced by a calm serenity. But as they began to relax, a low hum filled the air, a sound unfamiliar yet unmistakably ominous. Lucas pointed towards the horizon, where a strange glow began to form. "What now?" he asked, his voice a mix of exhaustion and fear. Dr. Martinez looked toward the glowing horizon, her expression grim. This was never just about one school or one town. Whitley's curse was a part of something larger, something we might have just unleashed. Emily picked up the grimoire, its cover still warm from the ritual. "Then we keep going," she said determinedly. "We find out what we've unleashed and how to stop it." As they prepared to leave the cemetery, a chill wind picked up, whispering secrets of old, urging them on their new journey. Behind them, the grave of Jonathan Whitley lay silent, a dark chapter closed, yet the book of horrors remained open, pages fluttering in the wind, waiting for new tales to be written. In the distance, the strange glow grew brighter, casting long shadows that seemed to beckon them forward. The night was far from over, and their fight against the darkness had only just begun. As they walked towards the car, their silhouettes bathed in the eerie light, the story paused, leaving their fate and the fate of the world hanging in a why every school in America is locking down into the abyss. As Emily, Lucas, and Dr. Martinez drove toward the glowing horizon, the atmosphere thickened with an anticipatory silence. The car's headlights barely cut through the fog that had settled over the landscape like a suffocating blanket. Emily clutched the grimoire tightly, feeling its residual warmth as if it pulsed with a life of its own. The closer they got to the source of the glow, the more the environment changed. Trees along the road were bent and twisted, their branches reaching out like desperate, gnarled hands, and the air was filled with a low, droning buzz that seemed to seep into their very bones. Lucas kept his eyes fixed on the road, his hands gripping the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity. "Do you think we did the right thing back there?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "It was the only thing we could do," Dr. Martinez replied, her gaze fixed on the glowing horizon. "But the true test is what comes next." The glow led them to a small, isolated town that seemed untouched by time. The buildings were old, their woodwork intricate and shadowed. But it wasn't the architecture that caught their attention, it was the absence of people. The town was eerily silent, devoid of movement, as if it had been abruptly deserted. They parked the car at the town square, where the glow was brightest. The source was not a lamp or fire, but rather an ethereal light emanating from a crack in the earth at the center of the square. The crack pulsed with a malevolent energy, casting unsettling shadows that danced on the old cobblestones. "Looks like we found the heart of it," Emily said, stepping out of the car. The grimoire in her hands felt heavier with each step she took towards the crack. As they approached, the air grew colder, and the low drone turned into a chorus of whispers, voices begging for help, others cursing them. The light from the crack threw their long shadows behind them, twisting their forms into monstrous shapes. Lucas pointed to the grimoire. "Is there anything in there about sealing this thing?" Before Emily could respond, the ground trembled violently under their feet, knocking them off balance. The crack widened, and from it emerged a host of spectral figures, their faces twisted in agony and despair, reaching out towards the living. Dr. Martinez, quick to react, started chanting a protective spell, her words cutting through the clamor of the ghostly horde. Emily joined in, her voice syncing with Dr. Martinez's in a powerful duet that seemed to calm the spirits momentarily. Lucas, though lacking in knowledge of the paranormal, threw the salt they had brought in a wide arc around them, forming a temporary barrier. The spirits hissed at the barrier, their forms flickering at the edges of the salt line. "We need to seal it now," Dr. Martinez shouted over the howl of the wind that had begun to whip around them. "Emily, the book!" Emily flipped through the grimoire, her fingers trembling as she searched for anything that could help. Finally, she found a sealing ritual, but it required a sacrifice, a life for a life. The words chilled her to the bone. "I'll do it," Lucas said suddenly, his voice firm. "This started with us, maybe it should end with one of us too." "No!" Emily protested, tears welling up in her eyes. "There has to be another way." But Lucas was already walking towards the crack, his decision made. "It's okay, Em. It's the only way to make sure this ends here." Emily and Dr. Martinez watched, helpless, as Lucas stepped closer to the glowing abyss. He turned back, giving them a reassuring smile. "Take care of each other," he said before turning back to face the crack. With a deep breath, Lucas jumped into the light, his body consumed by the glow. The spectral figures screamed, a sound so piercing it seemed to split the sky. Then, suddenly, the light imploded, sucking everything back into the crack, which began to close slowly, sealing itself with a final, resonant thud. The town square was silent once more, the only sound the soft crying of Emily as she fell to her knees. Dr. Martinez put an arm around her, offering what comfort she could. As they stood there, the first hints of dawn began to touch the sky, the night's horrors fading like a bad dream. But for Emily, the loss of Lucas was a wound that would never fully heal. They had stopped the curse, but at a cost that was too great to bear alone. The story ends with Emily picking up the grimoire, now just a book of memories, as she and Dr. Martinez walk back to their car, leaving the silent town behind.
In the small town of Blackwood Falls, nestled deep in the Appalachian Mountains, there exists a legend whispered among the locals. They speak of a cursed house, hidden away in the dense woods, where true terror resides. Many claim to have seen eerie lights flickering in the windows at night, and some swear they've heard blood-curdling screams echoing through the trees. One such tale involves a group of adventurous teenagers who dared each other to spend a night in the infamous house. Among them was Emma, a brave and curious soul who had always been drawn to the supernatural. Despite the warnings and the ominous history surrounding the house, Emma and her friends ventured into the woods one fateful evening, armed with flashlights and a thrill-seeking attitude. As they approached the dilapidated mansion, a sense of unease settled over the group. The air grew colder, and the usual sounds of the forest fell silent. Even the bravest among them hesitated, but Emma's determination spurred them onward. With a nervous laugh, they crossed the threshold into the house that had haunted their dreams. The interior was as decrepit as the exterior, with peeling wallpaper and creaking floorboards. Shadows danced in the corners, and strange symbols adorned the walls, remnants of a forgotten time. The air was thick with an oppressive energy, causing Emma and her friends to exchange uneasy glances. As the night wore on, strange occurrences began to unfold. Objects moved on their own, whispers drifted through the halls, and doors slammed shut without explanation. Emma, undeterred by the escalating supernatural activity, delved deeper into the mysteries of the house, determined to uncover its secrets. In one room, she discovered a dusty old journal, its pages filled with cryptic writings and chilling accounts of the house's dark past. It spoke of a family that had once lived there, driven mad by unseen forces, their tragic fates intertwined with the very walls of the house. As Emma read on, she sensed a presence watching her, a malevolent force that sought to keep its secrets buried. She shared her findings with her friends, urging them to leave before it was too late. But the allure of uncovering the truth was too strong, and they pressed on, unaware of the horrors that awaited them. The night grew darker, and the house seemed to come alive with malicious intent. Emma and her friends became separated, each experiencing their own nightmares within the cursed walls. One by one, they fell victim to the house's malevolence, disappearing into the darkness without a trace. Emma, now alone and terrified, realized the true nature of the house. It fed on fear, drawing strength from the terror of its victims. She tried to flee, but the house seemed to shift and change, trapping her in a nightmarish maze of twisting corridors and hidden rooms. Just as all hope seemed lost, Emma stumbled upon a hidden chamber deep within the house. Inside, she found a cryptic altar adorned with strange symbols and flickering candles. The air hummed with ancient power, and Emma knew that this was the heart of the house's darkness. As she searched for a way to break the curse and free herself from the house's grip, Emma heard a voice, a whisper from beyond the veil of reality. It spoke of a forgotten ritual, a chance to banish the evil that dwelled within the cursed mansion. With trembling hands, Emma followed the instructions, hoping against hope that it would work. The ritual was a harrowing ordeal, testing Emma's courage and resolve. She faced nightmarish visions and spectral entities that sought to drag her into the abyss. But fueled by determination and a desire for redemption, Emma completed the ritual, unleashing a surge of pure energy that reverberated through the house. For a moment, all was still. Then, with a deafening roar, the house began to crumble, its cursed foundations shaken by Emma's defiance. She raced against time, dodging falling debris and collapsing corridors as she made her escape. As Emma burst out into the moonlit night, the house behind her collapsed in on itself, consumed by the very darkness it had harbored for so long. She stood panting and exhausted, the weight of her ordeal heavy on her shoulders. But she knew that the true horror had not ended. The evil that had plagued the house now roamed free, seeking new victims to ensnare. Emma vowed to never forget the horrors she had faced, to warn others of the dangers that lurked in the shadows. But as she looked back at the smoldering ruins of the cursed house, a chill ran down her spine. She sensed that the darkness was not yet done with her, that the true nightmare was only just beginning. Emma stood amidst the wreckage of the cursed house, her breaths ragged as she surveyed the destruction. The moon cast an eerie glow over the scene, illuminating the twisted remnants of what was once a place of unspeakable terror. But despite the apparent victory, Emma knew deep down that the darkness had not been vanquished. It merely bided its time, waiting for the right moment to strike again. As she turned to leave, a sudden chill ran down her spine, and a voice whispered in the wind, a voice she recognized from her ordeal in the house. "You cannot escape me," it hissed, carrying with it a sense of ancient malice. Emma shivered but pressed on, determined to put as much distance between herself and the cursed grounds as possible. The following days were fraught with unease as Emma struggled to come to terms with what had transpired. She couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of unseen eyes following her every move. Sleep eluded her, haunted by nightmares of shadowy figures and echoing screams. Desperate for answers, Emma sought out the town's oldest residents, hoping they could shed light on the house's dark history. She listened to their tales of whispered legends and forgotten tragedies, piecing together fragments of a story that spanned centuries. According to the town's lore, the cursed house was once the residence of a wealthy family, the Delacroix. They were known for their reclusive nature and strange rituals performed under the cover of darkness. Whispers of deals made with dark forces and sacrifices offered in exchange for power sent chills down Emma's spine. The Delacroix' downfall came swiftly and mysteriously. One by one, they succumbed to madness and untimely deaths, their bodies found twisted and contorted within the walls of the house. The townsfolk spoke of curses and vengeful spirits, warning against meddling with forces beyond mortal comprehension. Emma's research led her to a forgotten cemetery on the outskirts of town, where the Delacroix family lay buried in unmarked graves. She wandered among the weathered tombstones, feeling the weight of centuries-old secrets pressing down on her. It was there, in the quiet solitude of the graveyard, that Emma encountered a figure cloaked in shadows. The figure spoke with a voice that resonated with an otherworldly echo, revealing itself to be the spirit of Isabella Delacroix, the youngest daughter of the cursed family. Isabella's ghost recounted a tragic tale of betrayal and forbidden knowledge. She spoke of a dark pact made by her ancestors, a pact that bound their souls to the house and unleashed unspeakable horrors upon anyone who dared to trespass. Emma listened with a mixture of fascination and horror, her heart racing as Isabella revealed the existence of a hidden artifact, a relic of untold power that lay dormant within the ruins of the cursed house. Isabella implored Emma to find the artifact and destroy it, for only then could the curse be broken and the spirits laid to rest. Armed with newfound knowledge and a sense of purpose, Emma returned to the cursed grounds, determined to confront the darkness head-on. The remnants of the house loomed before her, a stark reminder of the horrors she had faced. But she steeled herself, knowing that the fate of Blackwood Falls rested on her shoulders. As Emma ventured deeper into the ruins, she encountered spectral manifestations of the Delacroix family, twisted apparitions fueled by centuries of anger and despair. They lurked in the shadows, whispering curses and malevolent incantations that threatened to ensnare her soul. But Emma pressed on, guided by Isabella's ghostly presence and a glimmer of hope. She navigated through crumbling corridors and hidden chambers, facing spectral guardians and arcane traps that sought to hinder her progress. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of trials and tribulations, Emma reached the heart of the cursed house, the chamber where the artifact lay hidden. It was a small, unassuming object, a blackened talisman adorned with ancient symbols of power and doom. As Emma reached out to claim the artifact, a surge of malevolent energy surged through her, threatening to overwhelm her senses. But she clenched her jaw and focused her will, channeling all her determination into one decisive act. With a swift motion, Emma shattered the artifact, unleashing a blinding wave of light that engulfed the chamber. The ruins of the cursed house trembled and groaned, as if purged of a long-standing malignancy. But as the light faded and Emma emerged from the ruins, she knew that the darkness had not been banished, it had merely retreated, biding its time until it could rise again. The curse of the Delacroix lingered, a lingering shadow that haunted the town of Blackwood Falls. Emma knew that her battle was far from over. The true horror lay not in the crumbling ruins or vengeful spirits, but in the knowledge that evil could never truly be destroyed, it could only be contained, waiting for the next unwitting soul to unleash its wrath. As Emma emerged from the ruins of the cursed house, a sense of unease settled over her like a shroud. The once vibrant town of Blackwood Falls now seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for the other shoe to drop. Emma could feel the lingering presence of malevolent forces, a palpable tension that hung in the air. She knew that her actions had only bought the town a temporary reprieve, that the true horror of the Delacroix curse was far from over. As she walked through the silent streets, whispers seemed to follow her, carried on the wind like ominous warnings. Emma sought solace in the company of her friends, hoping that their shared ordeal would bring them closer together. But the events at the cursed house had taken a toll on them all, leaving behind scars that ran deeper than mere physical wounds. Among her friends was Liam, a stoic and pragmatic young man who had always been the voice of reason. But even Liam seemed haunted by the events of that fateful night, his usually steady demeanor now tinged with a hint of paranoia. Then there was Sarah, a free-spirited soul with a penchant for the supernatural. She had been the one to suggest exploring the cursed house, drawn by a morbid curiosity that now seemed like a terrible mistake. And finally, there was Alex, Emma's childhood friend and confidant. Alex had always been the protector of the group, his unwavering loyalty a source of comfort in times of uncertainty. But even he seemed on edge, his eyes darting nervously at every shadow. Together, they tried to make sense of what had happened, piecing together fragments of memories and shared nightmares. But the more they talked, the more they realized that the darkness that had plagued the cursed house had followed them back to Blackwood Falls. Strange occurrences began to unfold in the town, unexplained disappearances, eerie sightings, and a pervasive sense of dread that seemed to infect everyone. Emma and her friends knew that they couldn't ignore the signs, that they had to confront the evil that lurked in the shadows. Their investigation led them to a forgotten cemetery on the outskirts of town, similar to the one where Emma had encountered Isabella's ghost. But this cemetery held a darker secret, a hidden mausoleum that bore the Delacroix family crest. Inside the mausoleum, Emma and her friends discovered a series of cryptic symbols and inscriptions, each hinting at the dark legacy of the Delacroix curse. They deciphered passages that spoke of forbidden rituals and ancient pacts, of a power beyond mortal comprehension that had been unleashed centuries ago. As they delved deeper into the mysteries of the mausoleum, Emma sensed a growing unease among her friends. The air grew heavy, and whispers echoed off the cold stone walls, as if the very dead were trying to communicate with the living. Their exploration culminated in the discovery of a hidden chamber deep within the mausoleum, a chamber that housed a relic of immense power. It was a tome bound in human skin, its pages filled with arcane incantations and eldritch knowledge. Emma hesitated, her instincts warning her of the dangers of tampering with such dark magic. But the lure of answers, of a way to end the curse once and for all, proved too strong to resist. With trembling hands, Emma opened the tome and began to read aloud the ancient incantations. The air crackled with energy, and the chamber seemed to pulse with a malevolent force. As she spoke the final words of the incantation, a blinding light erupted from the tome, engulfing Emma and her friends in its searing embrace. They screamed in agony as the power of the curse surged through them, twisting their bodies and souls. When the light faded and Emma regained her senses, she found herself alone in the chamber. Her friends were gone, their fates unknown. But the darkness that had plagued Blackwood Falls seemed to have lifted, if only temporarily. Emma knew that she had paid a price for her actions, that the curse had claimed its toll. But she also knew that the battle against evil was never truly over, that it lurked in the shadows, waiting for the next unsuspecting victim to unleash its wrath. As she stumbled out of the mausoleum and into the moonlit night, Emma felt a chill run down her spine. She sensed that the true horror was yet to come, that the darkness had merely retreated, gathering its strength for a final, devastating strike. With a heavy heart and a mind filled with dread, Emma vowed to continue the fight, to never give up until the curse of the Delacroix was truly broken. But deep down, she knew that the true test of her courage and resilience was still to come, that the nightmare was far from over. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a pale light over the quiet town of Blackwood Falls. Emma walked the deserted streets, her senses on high alert, every shadow seeming to conceal a lurking threat. The events at the mausoleum had left her shaken, but her resolve remained unbroken. She knew that the darkness had not been banished, it had merely shifted, waiting for the right moment to strike again. As she reached the town square, Emma noticed a gathering of townsfolk near the old church. Curiosity piqued, she approached cautiously, her eyes scanning the crowd for any sign of danger. The atmosphere was tense, murmurs and whispers passing among the gathered residents. A voice cut through the quiet chatter, drawing Emma's attention, a voice she recognized as that of Father James, the town's long-serving priest. He stood on the steps of the church, his expression grave as he addressed the assembled crowd. "My friends," Father James began, his voice carrying a weight of solemnity, "we gather tonight not out of fear, but out of unity. The darkness that has plagued our town for generations has reared its head once more, but we shall not cower in its shadow." Emma listened intently, her heart pounding with a mix of apprehension and determination. She knew that the priest's words held a deeper meaning, that he was alluding to the resurgence of the Delacroix curse. Father James spoke of ancient rituals and forgotten lore, of a time when the town had faced similar trials and emerged stronger. He called upon the townsfolk to band together, to stand against the encroaching darkness with courage and faith. As the crowd dispersed, Emma approached Father James, her mind racing with questions. The priest regarded her with a knowing gaze, as if he could sense the turmoil within her. "Emma," he said softly, "you carry a heavy burden, one that few can understand. But know that you are not alone in this fight. The town stands behind you, united in our resolve to confront the darkness head-on." Emma nodded, grateful for the support yet burdened by the weight of responsibility. She knew that the key to ending the curse lay in uncovering the true origins of the Delacroix family's pact with darkness, a task that seemed daunting yet inevitable. Her thoughts turned to her friends, Liam, Sarah, and Alex, whose fates remained uncertain after the events at the mausoleum. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were still connected, their destinies intertwined in ways she couldn't fully grasp. Determined to find answers, Emma delved deeper into the town's history, scouring archives and old records for any mention of the Delacroix family's dark legacy. She uncovered tales of forbidden rituals and mysterious disappearances that dated back centuries, each adding a layer of dread to the unfolding mystery. One name kept recurring in Emma's research, a figure shrouded in myth and legend, yet central to the town's dark history. Madame Isadora, a reputed witch who had lived during the height of the Delacroix family's reign of terror. According to the stories, Madame Isadora had possessed immense knowledge of the occult, her powers rumored to rival those of the Delacroix themselves. But where the Delacroix had sought power through darkness, Madame Isadora had sought balance, using her abilities to protect the town from malevolent forces. Emma's curiosity was piqued, and she resolved to seek out Madame Isadora's hidden lair, a secluded cabin deep in the heart of the forest, rumored to be a repository of ancient knowledge and arcane artifacts. Armed with a sense of purpose, Emma ventured into the woods, the dense foliage and twisting paths a testament to nature's untamed beauty and inherent danger. The forest seemed to come alive around her, the rustle of leaves and the calls of nocturnal creatures adding to the eerie ambience. After what felt like hours of wandering, Emma stumbled upon a clearing that held the dilapidated remains of Madame Isadora's cabin. The structure was barely standing, nature reclaiming it with creeping vines and tangled roots. As Emma cautiously approached, she felt a tingling sensation in the air, a subtle shift in energy that signaled the presence of something ancient and powerful. She stepped inside the cabin, the musty scent of old books and dried herbs filling her nostrils. The interior was a treasure trove of occult artifacts, scrolls adorned with cryptic symbols, potions brewed from rare ingredients, and relics imbued with magical properties. Emma's eyes widened with wonder and trepidation, realizing that she stood on the threshold of forbidden knowledge. Her search led her to a hidden chamber beneath the cabin, a chamber that housed Madame Isadora's most guarded secrets. Among them was a tome, a grimoire of immense power, its pages bound in leather and etched with intricate sigils. Emma hesitated, her fingers hovering over the grimoire, a mix of fear and curiosity coursing through her veins. She knew that the knowledge contained within could hold the key to breaking the Delacroix curse, but she also understood the risks of delving too deep into dark magic. As she reached for the grimoire, a voice echoed in her mind, a voice that sounded eerily familiar. It was Isabella Delacroix, the ghost whose spirit had guided Emma through the trials at the mausoleum. "Emma," Isabella's voice whispered, "you must tread carefully. The secrets within that grimoire are both a blessing and a curse. They hold the power to undo the darkness that plagues our town, but they also carry the weight of untold consequences." Emma hesitated, torn between the desire for answers and the fear of unleashing even greater horrors upon Blackwood Falls. But the urgency of the situation weighed heavily on her, and she made a decision that would shape the fate of the town and all who dwelled within its borders. With a deep breath, Emma opened the grimoire and began to decipher its ancient text. The words seemed to come alive on the page, shifting and pulsating with an otherworldly energy. Emma's mind raced as she pieced together the incantations and rituals, each step bringing her closer to unlocking the grimoire's true power. But as she delved deeper into the arcane knowledge, Emma felt a creeping sense of unease. Whispers echoed in the chamber, disembodied voices murmuring words of warning and doom. Shadows danced on the walls, taking on sinister shapes that seemed to mock her efforts. Emma pressed on, her determination overriding her fear. She recited the incantations with precision, channeling the magic of the grimoire into a focused surge of energy. The air crackled with power, and Emma could feel the fabric of reality bending around her. And then, with a blinding flash, the ritual reached its climax. A surge of pure energy erupted from the grimoire, engulfing Emma in its searing embrace. She screamed, a primal cry of agony and ecstasy as the magic coursed through her, reshaping her very being. When the light faded and Emma regained her senses, she found herself standing in the heart of Blackwood Falls, a transformed being, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light, her skin pulsing with dark energy. The townsfolk stared in awe and terror, their faces a mixture of wonder and dread. Emma could sense their fear, their uncertainty at the sight of this newfound power that she wielded. But there was no time for explanations or reassurances. The darkness that had plagued Blackwood Falls for generations had been banished, its hold on the town finally broken. Yet Emma knew that this victory came at a price that she alone would bear. As she looked out at the town she had sworn to protect, Emma felt a heavy weight settle on her shoulders. She was no longer just Emma, the curious and determined seeker of truth. She was now something more, an entity of magic and mystery, bound by ancient forces beyond mortal comprehension. And with that realization came a sense of isolation, a loneliness that echoed in the depths of her soul. She was no longer one of them, no longer a mere mortal. She was an outcast, a guardian of secrets and a harbinger of unknown dangers. But even as the townsfolk whispered and stared, Emma knew that her journey was far from over. The darkness may have been vanquished for now, but it was a persistent foe, always lurking at the edges of reality, waiting for its chance to return. And so, with a heavy heart and a mind filled with uncertainty, Emma turned away from the town she had saved and walked into the night, her footsteps echoing in the silence. The horror of Blackwood Falls was over, but the horror of Emma's new existence had only just begun.
In the remote expanse of the Allegheny Forest, a dense canopy of trees stretches as far as the eye can see, their gnarled branches weaving a thick veil of darkness as the sun sets. The chirps of crickets fill the air, a natural symphony that grows louder with the encroaching night. Among the trees, a single tent stands out, its bright orange fabric a stark contrast against the muted browns and greens of the forest floor. The tent belongs to Nathan, a 28-year-old solo camper with a deep love for adventure and solitude. Nathan had set out from his bustling city life seeking peace and a break from his high-stress job in technology. His friends had warned him against camping alone, especially in such a secluded spot, but Nathan, with his typical adventurous spirit, dismissed their concerns. As night falls, Nathan sits by his small campfire, the flames casting ghostly shadows on the trees around him. He roasts marshmallows, a simple pleasure, and sips from a flask of whiskey, the warmth of the alcohol a welcome companion against the chill of the night. His only other companion is a small, battered radio, which crackles with the weather forecast, clear skies, a cold night. Several hours after nightfall, the forest symphony grows eerily quiet. Nathan senses a change in the air, a palpable tension that makes the hairs on the back of his neck stand. He scans the darkness, his headlamp casting beams of light that seem to be swallowed by the thick undergrowth. Shrugging off a feeling of unease, he decides it's time to turn in for the night. Inside the tent, Nathan wraps himself in his sleeping bag, the rustle of the nylon the only sound in the otherwise silent night. Just as he begins to drift off to sleep, a sudden snap of a twig jolts him awake. His heart races. He tells himself it's just a deer or a small animal, nothing to worry about. But then, another sound, whispers, barely audible, as if someone is speaking just outside the tent. Frozen in fear, Nathan holds his breath, straining to hear more. The whispers grow slightly louder, a mix of words he can't quite understand, as if spoken in a different language, or perhaps a distorted form of English. Nathan reaches slowly for his flashlight and knife, the tools feeling reassuringly solid in his trembling hands. Deciding he needs to know what's outside, Nathan unzips the tent, just a few inches, peering out into the darkness. The beam of his flashlight dances across the trees, revealing nothing but the endless forest. The whispers stop abruptly, the silence now as loud as the noises before. With a surge of courage, Nathan steps out of the tent, flashlight sweeping the area. His breath forms small clouds in the cold air as he investigates around the campsite. Nothing. No footprints, no signs of any presence. Shaken, he returns to the tent, convincing himself it was all in his head, perhaps amplified by the isolation. Back inside, he tries to sleep, but a deep, unsettling feeling gnaws at him. Just as he begins to relax, a chilling howl pierces the night, not of a wolf or a known animal, but something different, something eerily human. The sound seems to come from all directions, enveloping him in fear. Nathan sits up, his mind racing with thoughts of urban legends and tales of spirits that roam the forests. He knows he should leave, but the thought of packing up in the dark, vulnerable and exposed, terrifies him even more. He decides to wait for dawn, only a few hours away. As he waits, the events outside escalate. The ground seems to tremble faintly, and the temperature drops sharply. Frost forms on the inside of the tent. The whispers return, now clearer, as if beckoning him. Nathan clutches his knife, eyes wide open, staring at the fabric of the tent, half expecting it to be ripped away at any moment. Dawn finally arrives, and with the first light, the strange occurrences seem to dissipate. Nathan, exhausted and unnerved, packs up his camp with shaky hands, eager to leave the forest that no longer feels welcoming. As he does, he notices something odd, a set of footprints encircling his tent, too large and misshapen to belong to any animal he knows. With a backpack hefted over his shoulder, Nathan doesn't look back as he makes his way out of the forest, the chilling events of the night replaying in his mind. He knows he won't be returning to camp alone ever again, if he returns at all. As Nathan reaches the edge of the forest, stepping into the morning light of the surrounding meadow, he takes one last look back. The forest seems normal, the dark events of the night almost unbelievable in the light of day. But as he turns to leave, a whisper catches his ear, so faint he almost convinces himself he imagined it. He quickens his pace, desperate to put as much distance between himself and the forest as possible. The meadow, bathed in sunlight, should offer safety, but the echo of that final whisper lingers, chilling him more profoundly than the night's cold ever did. The road back to civilization is a long one, giving Nathan plenty of time to reflect on the night's terrors. His mind cycles through rational explanations, each less convincing than the last. He wonders if the isolation played tricks on his mind, or perhaps some pranksters, aware of his presence, decided to have a bit of morbid fun at his expense. But the footprints and the cold whisper in the light of day defy all logical explanations. As he walks, Nathan notices an unusual heaviness in the air, a thick fog beginning to roll across the meadow from the direction of the forest. It's unnatural, too early in the day for fog, and it moves against the breeze. It swirls and dances like smoke, but there's no fire to be seen. The sun, which had been bright and comforting, now seems to struggle against this creeping mist, its light dimming with every moment. Nathan's pace becomes a jog, his previous fatigue forgotten in a surge of adrenaline. The road seems to stretch endlessly before him, each turn revealing only more of the same desolate landscape, now turning eerie as shadows lengthen and the fog thickens. He hears the whisper again, clearer this time, a soft, sibilant voice calling his name, drawing out the syllables in a haunting melody. It seems to come from the fog itself, enveloping him, chilling his skin. With a burst of panic, Nathan runs, the sound of his own heavy breathing loud in his ears. But the fog is faster, enveloping him in a cold, damp cloak. Visibility drops to mere feet, and the world becomes a monochrome of gray. He stops, realizing the futility of running when he can barely see the path in front of him. His heart pounds in his chest, each beat echoing ominously in the quiet that the fog brings. Straining his ears, Nathan listens. The whispers have ceased, replaced now by a low hum almost imperceptible, like the sound of distant thunder. It grows gradually louder, vibrating through the ground and into his bones. He feels it more than hears it, a sinister drone that suggests movement, something coming towards him, something large. Nathan finds himself walking again, not sure where to go but unable to stand still. His mind screams for him to find a way out, to escape the enclosing darkness and the oppressive, vibrating hum. He stumbles over a root, catching himself just before he falls. The fog seems to pulse with his quickened heartbeat, each throb bringing it closer, tightening around him like a noose. As he rights himself, Nathan notices something odd about the ground where he nearly fell. It's not covered in grass like the rest of the meadow. Instead, it's a patch of bare earth, circular, as if the soil has been stirred or dug up recently. He crouches to inspect it, curiosity momentarily overcoming fear. The earth is loose, freshly turned, and there are markings in it, symbols that he doesn't recognize, but which send a new wave of fear through him. They seem deliberate, a message or a sign, but of what, he cannot fathom. Standing up, Nathan feels the vibration stronger now, and the fog seems almost alive, responsive to his movements. He begins to walk again, circling the strange patch of earth, his eyes scanning the fog for any sign of movement, any hint of what might be lurking there. He feels watched, hunted, and the isolation of the meadow, once a beautiful, serene place, now feels like a trap. Suddenly, the ground trembles underfoot, a strong, definitive shake that nearly knocks him to his knees. Nathan looks around wildly, trying to locate the source of the disturbance. The hum turns into a roar, a sound so deep and terrifying that it paralyzes him. From the fog, shapes begin to materialize, forms too large and too vague to be human, moving towards him with slow, deliberate steps. Nathan backs away, his mind racing for solutions, for any means of escape. The shapes grow clearer, their forms more distinct yet still shrouded by the fog. Their movements are unnatural, jerky, as if they are not used to walking on earth. Their eyes, if they have eyes, are hidden, but Nathan feels their gaze, cold and unyielding. He turns to run, desperation lending speed to his legs, the roar in his ears now deafening. The fog seems to chase him, and the shapes, whatever they are, do not fall behind. Nathan's thoughts blur with fear, each step a gamble in the thick fog. He stumbles forward, his feet occasionally tangling in the undergrowth hidden by the dense mist. His lungs burn with the effort, and the cold air sharpens each breath he takes. The monstrous roar has morphed into a cacophony of sounds, a chorus of groans and shrieks that seem to mock his desperate attempts to escape. Nathan can no longer tell if he's gaining distance or circling back towards the danger. The fog disorients, confuses, and seems almost sentient in its behavior. Panic grips him tighter with each passing moment, the primal part of his brain screaming that he's prey, stalked by something ancient and malevolent. The symbols he saw etched into the earth flash in his mind, a warning he had failed to heed. He realizes now that he might have disturbed something sacred or profane, a boundary meant not to be crossed by the living. Amidst his flight, Nathan's foot catches on a larger root, sending him sprawling to the ground. The impact knocks the wind out of him, and for a moment, he lies there, gasping for air, the mist swirling around him. He tries to rise, but a wave of dizziness overwhelms him, his head spinning as the ground seems to tilt and sway. The fog thickens, condensing into solid forms that hover just out of clear sight, their presence oppressive, almost tangible. As he struggles to his knees, Nathan feels a chill unlike any other, as if the very air around him wishes to consume his warmth. The shapes in the mist now circle him, their forms massive and imposing, moving with a purposeful grace that belies their grotesque appearances. He can hear their breathing now, a raspy, labored sound that syncs with the pulsating hum still vibrating through the earth. He looks up, trying to make out any details that might give him a clue as to what these beings are. But the fog blurs their features, leaving only impressions of twisted limbs and gaping maws. One of the shapes moves closer, the ground rumbling beneath its weight. Nathan can see it more clearly now, a towering figure, its body covered in what looks like matted fur or tangled vines. The eyes, if they are eyes, glow faintly through the mist, a deep, malevolent red. Desperation surges within him, and Nathan scrambles backward, his hands clawing at the wet ground. His back hits something solid, an unexpectedly warm and pulsating mass. He turns his head slowly, terror mounting as he comes face to face with another creature, its features just inches from his own. This one is different, smaller but no less horrifying. Its face is a jumbled mess of soil and roots, with hollows where eyes should be, and a mouth that opens and closes with a sickening squelch. Nathan tries to scream, but the sound catches in his throat, a strangled whimper the only noise he manages. The creature tilts its head, as if curious, then extends what could be an arm, the appendage ending in multiple writhing tendrils. They reach for Nathan, brushing against his face with a touch that burns like frostbite. He jerks away, the sudden movement granting him a burst of adrenaline. Nathan scrambles to his feet, running blindly, no longer caring about direction, only the primal need to escape. The creatures do not chase him this time, instead, they remain silent observers, their forms retreating into the mist as he distances himself from them. The ground under Nathan's feet begins to change, growing marshy and wet. He's nearing a river, the realization sparking a flicker of hope. Water might offer a barrier, a means to throw off whatever these things are. With renewed purpose, he pushes forward, the roar of rushing water growing louder with each step. He emerges from the fog at the riverbank, the sudden clarity of vision almost blinding. The river is wide and tumultuous, swollen from recent rains. Nathan doesn't hesitate, he dives into the cold water, letting the current pull him away from the shore, away from the horrors lurking in the mist. As he's carried downstream, Nathan glances back. The fog remains dense on the river's edge, a wall of white that seems impenetrable. He can still feel the creature's eyes on him, watching as he flees their domain. The river carries him away, but the sense of being hunted lingers, a scar upon his psyche that may never fully heal. Exhausted, cold, and terrified, Nathan allows the river to guide his escape, the waters a temporary sanctuary from the nightmare behind him. But as the sounds of the forest return, the rustle of leaves and the distant calls of birds, a deeper silence sets in, one that suggests his ordeal might not be over. The mist from the forest begins to creep over the river, tendrils of fog reaching out over the water, hinting that the boundary between the natural and the supernatural might not be as firm as he hoped. As Nathan struggles against the pull of the current, he becomes aware that the fog is not merely following him, it seems to be emanating from him, as if he himself is now a source of this otherworldly mist. the realization strikes him with a cold dread. What if his intrusion into their domain has marked him? What if he has become a part of the forest's dark folklore, an unwilling participant in some ancient and ongoing horror? The water around him grows colder, and the mist thickens, swirling with an intensity that mirrors his rising panic. Nathan tries to swim faster, his strokes desperate and uncoordinated. He looks to the riverbanks, searching for a sign of civilization, a path back to the normal world. But the banks are shrouded in thick vegetation, and the mist obscures any further view. He feels isolated, as though the river has carried him not just away from danger, but also away from the reality he knows. The temperature drops further, and the river seems to slow, its currents less urgent. Nathan's limbs grow heavy, his movements sluggish as the cold seeps into his bones. He fights against the lethargy, his mind racing to find a way out, to escape the enveloping fog that now seems to pulse with a life of its own. He hears them again, the whispering voices, no longer just at the edge of his hearing but clear, insistent. They speak in a language he doesn't understand, yet the tone is unmistakable, inviting, coaxing him to stop struggling, to give in to the inevitable. Nathan shouts back at them, a raw, hoarse cry of defiance that echoes off the unseen riverbanks. The fog responds, swirling faster, condensing into forms that are almost human in shape. Figures emerge, walking on the water's surface, their movements synchronized with the swirling mist. They are closer this time, their features more defined. Their faces are hauntingly beautiful yet utterly alien, expressions blank yet filled with an incomprehensible longing. Nathan realizes that he is not just fleeing from a physical threat, but from a spiritual entanglement. His very soul feels ensnared by the mist, each breath drawing him deeper into its grasp. The river no longer feels like a sanctuary but more like a conduit, a pathway meant to deliver him into the hands of these spectral beings. As he swims, Nathan spots something in the water ahead, a boat, old and waterlogged, but seemingly solid. With his last reserves of strength, he reaches it and hauls himself aboard. The boat creaks under Nathan's weight as he collapses onto its damp floorboards, gasping for air. The mist swirls around him, thickening into an impenetrable wall that obscures everything beyond a few feet. He realizes with a sinking feeling that he's trapped, caught between the river that offers a slim chance of escape and the mist that seems to be closing in on all sides. The voices continue their haunting whispers, now louder and more urgent. They seem to come from within the mist itself, from the very air that surrounds him. Nathan clutches at his chest, his heart pounding with fear and exertion. The boat rocks gently on the water, a surreal calm in contrast to the chaos inside his mind. As he tries to gather his thoughts, a figure materializes from the mist at the bow of the boat. It's a woman, her features ethereal yet strikingly human. Her eyes are pools of darkness, and her skin seems to emit a faint glow. Nathan's breath catches in his throat as he recognizes her from the symbols etched in the earth, the guardian, the keeper of the forest's secrets. The woman speaks, her voice a melodic echo that resonates through Nathan's very being. "You have trespassed," she intones, her gaze unwavering. "You have disturbed the balance, and now you must face the consequences." Nathan struggles to find his voice, his mind racing with questions and regrets. "I didn't mean to," he stammers, his words lost in the swirling mist. "I just wanted," but the woman raises a hand, silencing him. "Intentions matter little in the grand design," she says, her tone neither condemning nor forgiving. "The forest demands retribution, and you must pay the price." Nathan's fear spikes, a cold sweat breaking out on his skin. He knows he's at the mercy of forces far beyond his understanding, and escape seems futile. The mist closes in further, enveloping the boat in a cocoon of impenetrable white. The woman steps closer, her presence both mesmerizing and terrifying. "You will become one with the forest," she declares, her voice now a whisper that echoes in Nathan's mind. "Your essence will feed its ancient hunger, and your fate will be entwined with its eternal cycle." Nathan's screams are swallowed by the mist as it consumes him, merging his form with its amorphous mass. His consciousness fades, replaced by a sense of oneness with the forest, with the ancient spirits that dwell within its depths. He becomes a part of the mist, a lost soul condemned to wander the boundary between the living and the dead. The boat drifts aimlessly on the river, a silent witness to the horror that unfolded within its confines. The mist dissipates, returning the riverbank to normalcy, save for the lingering sense of unease that permeates the air. The forest watches, silent and inscrutable, its secrets preserved within the swirling mists. Nathan's fate serves as a warning to those who dare to venture into its heart alone, a cautionary tale of the price one must pay for disturbing the ancient slumber of the Allegheny forest. And as night falls once again, the whispers return, carried on the breeze that rustles through the trees. They speak of forgotten legends and restless spirits, of souls lost to the darkness that lurks within the forest's embrace. The tale of Nathan, the solitary camper who dared to challenge the unknown, becomes a part of the forest's lore, a story whispered around campfires and shared in hushed tones, a tale of horror and warning, of a fate sealed in the misty depths of the Allegheny forest.